Guys, I got a comment section in my box, in my Instagram page, and the guy asked me, one of my subscribers asked me, why does Belarus celebrate the 7th of November? Why is Belarus the only country, as far as I know, in the world, even in the ex-USSR, that still celebrates the 7th of November as a national holiday? Well, I think it's probably because of tradition, and also it's because the government here is socialist-minded. It's ideologically left, and that's why this country celebrates the 7th of November. Do I like it? I think yes, absolutely. I think it's also nice that a lot of the ex-USSR states, they still celebrate 8 Marta, the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. And of course, this is in recognition of the great role that women have played in society, of course, in building the Soviet Union. And that is, of course, the topic of this video. And I also got a message from another subscriber who asked me, what do you think of the Soviet Union? And this is why I have decided to dedicate this video to my own viewpoint of the USSR and the Russian Revolution. Especially, it's the 102nd anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution. Okay, that took place way back in 1917. Some people say that oh, it should never have happened, and it was a great travesty. But like the American Revolution before, like the French Revolution of 1789, these events happened for a reason. In terms of the American Revolution, which I believe kicked the whole events off in terms of democracy and freedom and revolutionary spirit. The American Revolution came about due to a dissatisfaction of many colonials who were quite frankly fed up of no representation in the colonies, in the 13 colonies, despite them paying their taxes and being loyal subjects of King George. The French Revolution came about in 1789 because France had stagnated. French society had stagnated for so many years, for decades. The wars of Louis XIV had ruined France, and the subsequent kings that came after King Louis XIV, King Louis XV, and the even more incompetent King Louis XVI, set the seeds for the French Revolution. And why did the Russian Revolution happen? Well, because Russian society, Imperial Russian society, stagnated. And of course, the First World War, Russia's participation in the First World War sped up the events that led to the Great October Socialist Revolution. Okay, and as a socialist myself, as someone who's on the left of the political spectrum, I've always looked up to the achievements of the Soviet Union. You can't get away from the achievements of the USSR. Look at it in 1922. When you compare the USSR in 1922 and compare the USSR in 1982, the space of progress, the growth, the achievements can never ever be discounted. When you think about it, like in 1914, when Imperial Russia, when it entered the First World War in August 1914, only 26% of the population approximately were literate. By 1960, illiteracy was completely wiped out, nearly wiped out. Literacy rate was like 99%. Of course, there were some people who still couldn't read and write, but illiteracy was completely wiped out. The USSR, the mass industrialization, the 5-year plans of the 1930s, albeit, yes, happened at a great cost to human life in the purges. Okay, and of course, the defeat of the Nazis in World War II, the Wehrmacht, the Nazi German army, perhaps the greatest land army since Genghis Khan. Nearly 80% of the Wehrmacht was pitted against the USSR, and the USSR defeated the Nazis. Okay, of course, they got some help with the land lease from Britain and America. But the USSR, the people of the Soviet Union, and especially the people here in Belarus, paid a huge sacrifice to defeat fascism and to guarantee that human civilization would not enter a new dark ages. And for that, I think we should be very, very grateful to the role and to the sacrifice that the people of the Soviet Union played, and of course the people of Belarus played. Because people have to remember this, that Belarus lost over 2.5 million people in the Second World War, especially those of the Jewish origin. Minsk in 1941, before the invasion, before Operation Barbarossa, had quite a large Jewish population. Something like 40% of the population of Minsk was Jewish. But by the end of the war, the Jewish population of Belarus had been completely wiped out because of the Holocaust, because of the organized Nazi, evil, Nazi German industrialized war machine that consumed the lives of millions of people. Over 60 million people were lost in the Second World War. And that's why I think that we should always thank the role and the sacrifice that the Red Army played in defeating fascism. Okay, and this ties into the achievements of the Soviet Union, the mass industrialization, the 5-year plans. And it's because of the industrialization that took place in the Soviet Union in the 1930s that enabled it, by and large, to defeat Nazi Germany. You know, so yeah, you know, the achievements of the Soviet Union should never ever be forgotten. You know, mass literacy campaign, universal education, universal healthcare, housing. You know, the USSR dragged hundreds of millions of its citizens out of abject poverty in the space of 2 generations. No other country in modern history has actually managed to do this. When you think about the Industrial Revolution in Germany, in Britain, in France, Western Europe, that took about 200 years. In the Soviet Union, it took them 2 generations, and they managed to do it. They put a man into space, they won the space race, and the USSR was a country that of innovation, of invention. Not many people know this, but the humble mobile phone, the contraption, the object that we use every day, that we take for granted every day, was invented in the Soviet Union. Now, I'm not attempting to gloss over the crimes that took place here in the USSR. The crimes under Stalin, the mass deportations, the gulags, the labor camps. This is a very dark blot on the history of the USSR, to say the least. You know, I talk to many older people here, and I ask them this question: was it better during the Soviet Union, during the USSR? And they said yes, for a very, very simple reason. It was a socialist state, and they looked after their citizens. Guaranteed housing, universal education, universal healthcare, job for life, paid holidays, paid vacation. You know, it was a strong country. It was a country that was looked up by many people across the world. And as an Irish person, we have our own little link to the USSR. When we declared independence from the British Empire in 1919, the Bolsheviks, Lenin, or what was called Russia, at the time Soviet Russia, they were the first country, if you could call them that recognized our Declaration of Independence. And in the 1920s, Joseph Stalin gifted the nascent Irish Free State to the Fabergé eggs. Of course, we handed them back to the USSR about 3 decades later, you know, because we felt that you know, it belonged to the people, didn't belong to us. So yeah, that was our little link with the USSR. And as someone on the left, you know, it's the USSR, its legacy should never be forgotten, its achievements, but at the same time, its crimes. Of course, the crimes of the Soviet Union pale into comparison with those of, for example, the British Empire. And coming from Ireland, whose grandparents were born into the British Empire, who suffered under the rule of the British Empire. I think that resonates with me, you know, to say the least. Okay, so that is my 2 kopecks on the day of the 7th of November and the October Revolution, and of course the Soviet Union. So I think overall, I think history will judge Lenin and the founder of the Soviet Union and the USSR in a positive light, despite the mistakes that it made. It wasn't perfect, but cometh the hour, cometh the man. Everything happens for a reason. Revolution happens for a reason. The USSR eventually collapsed for a reason. Well, it stagnated, like the old Russian Empire, like the British Empire, like the French Empire. And there's a lesson in that for everybody, and that we must never ever ignore the winds of change and the progress of history. All right, so that is about what I'm going to say today, guys. So yeah, I'm gonna head off and I'm going to enjoy my holiday. So be cool, and I shall see you whenever. Do svidania.